Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're plunging into a really unique collection of sources. It mainly revolves around some pretty eccentric ideas from a figure named Teufelsdröckh.
Yes, Teufelsdröckh. And also a related sort of sweeping look at heroism through history.
And these sources, they're dense, sometimes genuinely strange, right? A mix of philosophy, biography, cultural critique.
They are. They're not your typical straightforward texts. The sources themselves are framed through an editor figure who's struggling.
Struggling how?
Struggling to make sense of these scattered, difficult-to-read documents. The text actually calls them unimaginable documents from their perplexed cursive schrift. German handwriting, you know.
Cursive script, okay. So the editor's job is...
It's basically to build a firm bridge for British travelers, as it says, into these very German, very strange ideas.
Got it. So right away, there's this layer of interpretation. We're exploring Teufelsdröck's world places like Weissenich.
Which literally means know not where.
Right. Symbolic. And maybe the Thurgrunengan's coffee house gets mentioned.
Possibly, yeah. These little atmospheric details.
So our mission today is to kind of wade through all this, pull out the key insights, and figure out why these ideas about, reality, symbols, belief, great individuals, why they might still really matter to you today.
Absolutely. Where should we start? The close.
Let's do it. Okay, let's unpack this.
Right. So the absolute core of Teufelsdröck's work, where the sources really kick off, is his seemingly bizarre philosophy of clothes.
Yeah, the editor sounds pretty taken aback by it, too. A whole philosophy on clothes.
Exactly. It sounds trivial, maybe, but it becomes clear very quickly he's not talking about, tailoring techniques or laundry.
So what is the key insight then?
The insight is that clothes are really our most fundamental symbols. The sources present them as religious vestments, even.
Religious vestments, wow.
Yeah, as symbols expressing man's deepest sense of the divine mystery.
So it goes way beyond just fashion or covering up.
Oh, completely. The concept just explodes from there. The universe itself is seen as the garment, right? A clothing of the higher celestial invisible.
The universe as clothing.
Yeah, described as unimaginable, formless, dark, with excess of bright. And Teufelsdröckh says the beginning of all wisdom is to look fixedly on clothes till they become transparent.
Look until they become transparent. So see through them.
Exactly. See through the surface layer, the appearance, to whatever is underneath.
Okay. And the sources use some pretty wild examples of actual physical clothes to make this point, don't they? About appearance versus reality.
They really do. Vivid stuff, like descriptions of 15th century German fashion. Get this. Breeches without seat.
Without a seat, seriously.
And gowns scalloped out behind and before, and these train gowns 4 or 5 L's in length that needed boys to carry them.
That's just impractical.
Totally. But the point drawn is really stark. Most men do reverence to the fine frogged broadcloth, no wise to the straddling animal with bandy legs, which it holds.
So we respect the uniform, the status symbol, the expensive cloth, not the actual person inside it.
Precisely. We worship the surface, the symbol, which leads him to this pretty provocative idea of the tailor as creator or divinity.
The tailor as God.
Well, kind of. The sources mention Swift might have hinted at it. Franklin maybe snatched some thunder. But the tailor, he lends identity through the clothes he makes.
Right, because in a world obsessed with surfaces, the person who creates the surface seems to hold the power, or at least bestow the status that others recognize.
Exactly. And this connects to that strange condition Teufelsdröckh claims to have, this physical or psychical infirmity.
What's that?
He says he sometimes sees people completely naked, even important people. Dukes, bishops, generals.
Whoa! So he sees them stripped of their clothes, their status, their office.
That's the idea, stripped bare. He talks about how it affects his view of official events, like newspaper presentations listing dignitaries. Well, if you mentally picture every mother's son of them stand straddling there, not a shirt on them, he says, it's pretty hard to take their puffed-up importance completely seriously.
I can imagine. It's a potent image.
It really is. It drives home how much of our world, this rag fair of a world, as he calls it, runs on just revering surfaces and symbols, not the underlying reality. It really pushes you to ask, what clothes, what formulas are we accepting right now without really looking through them?
Good question. So after laying out this pretty radical worldview, the sources kind of shift gear, don't they? They move towards Teufelsdröck's own life.
They do. And the editor, again, notes how hard it is to piece together a clear story from these miscellaneous paper masses. biographical fragments, really.
So it's like trying to see the philosopher himself navigating this world of appearances he just described.
Exactly. We get glimpses of his youth. He's called young forlorn sometimes, or Neshen. He grows up in Entepfel,
Which means duck pond.
right. Again, these names suggest someone may be humble, a bit lost, in a very ordinary place. It reinforces that idea that, profound insights don't always come from grand settings or official channels.
And he learns more from the world than from school. The sources seem critical of formal education.
Very critical. He learns from the grand volume of the world, it says. There's a sharp critique of an education system focused just on facts, comparing fashioning the souls by knowledge to blowing their bodies to pieces by gunpowder.
That's intense.
It is. The idea is that this kind of rational university leads either to impotent skepticism, just doubt without action, or finished self-conceit. It reduces the universe to a mere machine.
A dead machine, no mystery, no spirit.
Exactly. Sterile, meaningless. And into this sort of intellectual dryness comes the real heart of his personal story, the love affair with Blumine.
Blumine, right. Described how?
As young, hazel-eyed, beautiful, but also significantly dependent and insolvent.
And before her, his view of women was quite idealized, almost detached.
Yeah, the text says holy were heavenly, kind of hovering on the outskirts of aesthetic tea, like appreciating art from a distance.
But Blumine is different.
Oh, yes. She breaks through all that. His love for her is described as heartily and even frantically intense. He sees her as this celestial being whose orbit crosses his mundane one. He feels delirious vertigo in the thought of actually winning her.
So a really profound, genuine connection in this world he otherwise sees as quite superficial.
Absolutely, a moment of intense reality for him.
But it doesn't end well, does it? The sources are quite stark about it.
No, it ends painfully. She resigned herself to wed someone with capital.
Capital money. Yeah. So a very practical, material reason for her choice.
That's the strong implication, and it just brutally contrasts with his, spiritualized, intense ideal of their connection.
How does he take it?
It devastates him. It's called his Blumine lover's leap, described as a real doomsday, a complete dissolution of nature for him personally.
Oh, a doomsday?
Yeah. And this personal crisis, this loss, it sends him into this period of deep suffering and rootless wandering, a perambulation and circumambulation of the terraqueous globe.
So just drifting aimlessly.
Pretty much. From country to country, from condition to condition, utterly lost.
And the descriptions of his inner state during this time are really powerful.
They are. Feeling totally cast out, caught in the mill of death, this chronic sickness, his heart smoldering in sulfurous fire. Dark stuff.
And that image of him only shedding a tear once in all this time.
While reciting Faust's death song, yeah. It speaks volumes about just how deep and isolated his despair must have been.
So this rock bottom, does it lead anywhere?
It does. It leads him to what the sources call the center of indifference.
The center of indifference sounds bleak.
It is bleak. But it's presented as more than just a low point. It's framed as a necessary passage, a state you have to travel through to get from the negative pole to the positive.
So it's not just misery to be endured, it's actually a required crucible, a necessary stage.
That's exactly how it's framed. It's this point of absolute zero, zero expectation, zero hope, where everything superficial is just stripped away. You can't go any lower.
Okay, so after hitting this absolute bottom, this indifference, then what?
Then comes the turning point. This is the everlasting yay.
The everlasting yay sounds much better.
Definitely. It's described as a hard-fought battle, like a temptation in the wilderness, a real struggle.
And there's a specific symbolic moment.
Yes, a high moment in the Rue de l'Enfer, the street of hell, literally. He's confronted by the fiend of despair, of negation, everything telling him life is meaningless.
Yeah.
And he answers it, valiantly, the text says, with a page satana, "Get thee behind me, Satan." It's this conscious, willed act of rejecting the no.
A choice.
A fundamental choice. And this marks the shift. The meaning of life, he realizes, isn't found in just passively suffering or endlessly questioning. It's found in freedom and voluntary force.
Voluntary force, like willpower.
Exactly. The power of the will, the power of action, even though you're still compassed round with necessity, with limits, and the God-given mandate, the thing you must do, becomes work thou in well-doing.
Work in well-doing. So positive action.
Positive, constructive action. He finds this clarity while meditating, as in my sky tent, sort of above the confusion. And crucially, he decides the whole debate about the origin of evil, why bad things happen, that has to end.
Why does it have to end?
Because it's paralyzing. It keeps you stuck in idle suffering instead of moving into actual endeavoring. You can analyze forever, but it doesn't change anything.
So the yay is fundamentally about choosing action, purpose, and work over just endless, crippling analysis and despair.
Precisely. It's the active affirmation of life and meaning, discovered through and after the deepest doubt and suffering.
And this personal journey, this breakthrough from paralysis to action, it feels like a natural bridge to the next big theme in the sources, right? About individuals who embody this. Heroes.
Absolutely. It flows directly into the concept of hero worship, defined simply as transcendent admiration of a great man.
And it's presented as something really fundamental.
Yes, the deepest root of things like religion and society, the vivifying influence in man's life, essential stuff.
But the sources also say their own time, the time they were written in, kind of denied this.
Yeah, they're quite critical, saying this is an age that, as it were, denies the existence of great men. And they argue this goes against a basic human need, the need to bow down submissive before great men, to recognize and follow genuine greatness.
Okay, so what makes someone a great man, a hero, according to this perspective? What's the core quality?
The sources are very clear. The primary foundation is sincerity.
Sincerity. We heard that with Teufelsdröck's breakthrough.
Exactly. Heroes cannot help being sincere, it says. Because for them, the great fact of existence is great. They see reality clearly.
It's not just being honest then, it's about perception.
It's deeper than just not telling lies. It's a fundamental alignment with reality. They see the underlying fact, not just the clothes or the formulas, the surfaces, and they act based on that clear sight.
Okay. And the sources then explore different types of heroes, how this sincerity shows up in different roles.
Right. They go through several forms, using specific historical figures as examples. First up is the hero as divinity.
Divinity, like gods.
Yeah, looking at Scandinavian paganism, Odin is the main example. But the insight isn't just about mythology. It's about seeing these figures as representing fundamental forces or realities. Thor is thunder, Hymir's cows are icebergs.
Ah, personifications of nature's power.
Kind of. And Odin himself is seen as the primal thinker, the original man, the seer, the one who first grasps a truth and awakens thought in others.
Okay, then who's next?
Next, the hero as prophet. And the key example given is Muhammad.
Muhammad, okay. How is he presented?
Well, the sources set the scene in Arabia, talk about the ancient worship at Mecca, the black stone, maybe an aerolite, and then his life story. Orphaned, raised by his uncle, marriage to Khadija, his retreat to the cave in Mount Hara.
Where he has his revelations.
Exactly. Finding the one God and, crucially, the just law of the world. And the sources stress that conforming to this law is the only true morality known.
So his sincerity lay in grasping this fundamental law and communicating it.
Yes, and they emphasize his religion wasn't easy, it didn't succeed by pandering. They mention his plain speech, his candid ferocity, but also his mercy. The core message highlighted is belief is great, life-giving. Arabia grew through this powerful, sincere belief. The source really focuses on that aspect, the power of his sincere conviction and its impact.
Belief leading to transformation.
Okay.
After the prophet.
The hero as poet. Dante and Shakespeare are the main examples here.
Poets as heroes. How does that work?
Through their sincerity and depth of vision, which makes them musical, they see and articulate fundamental truths about existence in a way that resonates deeply. Dante's Divine Comedy is called a supernatural world cathedral.
Wow. A cathedral built of words.
Yeah, born from mystic, unfathomable song while he was in exile, speaking from the heart like the antique prophets.
And the source contrasts Dante with Napoleon.
It does, calling Napoleon great but dumb, meaning powerful, historically significant, sure, but lacking that deep, articulate insight of the poet. Military genius isn't the same as prophetic vision.
And Shakespeare.
Also seen as a prophet, in his way, because he sees nature itself as divine. He reveals the deeper realities through his plays. And the idea is put forward that a nation that has a Dante or a Shakespeare is fundamentally bound together by that shared vision.
Art as a unifying force, rooted in sincere passion. Interesting. Okay, what's next?
Following the poet is the hero as priest. But this category quickly broadens into the man of letters.
Man of letters, like writers.
Exactly. It starts with the traditional priest guiding souls, but then argues the invention of printing changed everything. Books become the new miraculous runes. They hold the soul of the whole pastime.
So writers take over the priest role.
That's the radical assertion, yeah. The writers of newspapers, pamphlets, poems, books, it says, are our real working effective church, our actual priesthood.
That's a huge claim. giving writers immense responsibility.
Immense. But the sources immediately contrast this potential power with the reality they observed a chaos where chaos should sit umpire. There's a sense that this power isn't always used well, or that the true men of letters, the sincere ones, are perhaps lacking or struggling, and it notes money isn't the main thing needed.
Sincerity again, not just influence or wealth.
Yeah.
Okay, and the final category.
The hero as king, the leader, the ruler.
How is the true king defined here?
As the acknowledged strongest man, but not just physically strong in will, strongest in connection to reality, the one best able to do what needs doing.
And the examples.
Cromwell is a major one. The English Puritan War is framed not just as politics, but as belief against unbelief, a struggle over fundamental realities.
But Cromwell is controversial. How do the sources handle that?
They acknowledge the controversy, but see him as prophetic. His famous confusion of speech isn't seen as him being inarticulate, but as reflecting the immense difficulty of translating deep inner conviction and meaning into words.
So his actions stemmed from that deep conviction.
Yes, guided by devout prostration before the highest. His controversial actions, like dissolving Parliament, are interpreted by these sources as necessary acts of sweeping away dead formulas, empty rituals, hypocritical rules with forceful reality, getting things done based on truth, not just procedure.
And they lament that later, more skeptical ages misunderstand him.
Exactly. Because those later ages lack the framework of belief and sincerity to grasp his motivations. They see only ambition or fanaticism, missing the connection to underlying fact.
How is Napoleon seen in comparison?
He's contrasted with Cromwell, seen as potentially great, but ultimately flawed, falling into blamable ambition perhaps, and crucially, starting to believe in semblances, appearances, power for its own sake, rather than grounding himself in facts, in reality. He's called a great ébauche, a rude draft never completed.
Like an unfinished sketch. Great potential, but didn't fully realize it because he lost that core sincerity.
That's the interpretation offered, yes. The core distance isn't their power, but what their power was based on. Reality and sincerity versus appearances and ambition.
And there are other figures mentioned too, right? To reinforce this idea of sincere struggle.
Yes, definitely. People like Samuel Johnson, battling through a skeptical age, living on almost nothing, fourpence halfpenny a day, but with this giant invincible soul, preaching fact sincerity and demanding people clear your mind of cant.
Clear your mind of cant, get rid of the hypocrisy, the empty talk.
Exactly. And Burns, overcoming disadvantage through his genuine voice. Mirabeau, the French revolutionary figure, noted for his insight and sincerity despite his flaws. There's also this bricklayer analogy.
What's that?
It illustrates the danger of the too unable person trying to build something. If they lack the sincerity, the skill, the connection to reality, the whole structure will collapse. Incompetence rooted in insincerity is dangerous.
So this whole gallery of heroes, from gods to poets to kings to writers, they're all united by seeing past the clothes, past the appearances, and acting from a place of deep, sincere conviction about reality.
That's the thread running through it all, and it brings us right back around to the beginning, to symbols and clothes. The sources revisit the idea that all worship whatsoever must proceed by symbols, by idols.
So symbols and formulas aren't bad in themselves.
No, not inherently. They're called indispensably good. They're necessary methods, paths, ways for us humans to grasp reality and organize ourselves, like language, like rituals, like laws, like clothes.
There's always a but.
But they become dead if they lose the connection to the underlying reality, the belief, the fact they're supposed to represent, when the symbol becomes more important than the substance.
We just worship the fine frog broadcloth again.
Exactly. Which is why sincerity, belief, connecting to that just law of the world or the great fact of existence, why these things are presented is absolutely vital. They're the lifeblood that keeps the symbols meaningful. They're the basis for real action, the way to overcome that skepticism and paralysis we saw Teufelsdröckh wrestling with in The Center of Indifference.
And there's a call for connection, too, between people who see this.
Yes, a strong sense of potential unity. Infinite is the help man can yield to man. A call for the awestruck wakeful, those who experience existence as a profound reality, not just a machine or a rag fair to find each other and unite.
Interesting. And the source itself even acknowledges that some people might doubt the whole Teufelsdröckh setup.
It does, yeah. It mentions a North American reviewer who thinks Teufelsdröckh is just made up, pointing out that Weiß nicht tu means know not where, and Teufel is just a duck pond.
So the text anticipates its own critique. A bit meta.
Very much so. It almost preemptively defends its unusual form. The editor basically asks, does it matter if Teufelsdröckh himself is real or fictional, if the insights he delivers about human nature, society, symbols, belief, sincerity, if those insights are potent and feel true?
It's the message, not the messenger's literal existence, the reality of the ideas versus the close of the presentation.
Perfectly put.
And how do the sources wrap things up? Is there a final image?
Yes, a very powerful one. The world phoenix burning herself. It's a symbol of societal death and decay, acknowledging that the age the sources were written in felt like such a time of breakdown.
Burning down. But a phoenix rises from the ashes.
Exactly. There's that hope for a fairer living society arising out of the ruins of the old dead one. But it comes with a caution. This rebirth takes long time, struggle, and suffering.
So it's a challenging outlook, but ultimately cyclical, maybe hopeful, that even out of destruction, something new and real can emerge.
Provided it's built on that foundation of sincerity and reality, yeah. Not just more dead formulas.
Yeah. So we've taken quite a journey here from the very strange but surprisingly deep philosophy of clothes, using that as a lens to see through appearances.
Yeah, then tracing Teufelsdröck's personal struggle through doubt, despair, that center of indifference, all the way to the everlasting yea. That crucial choice for action and belief.
And then exploring the nature of heroes in various forms, divinity, prophet, poet, priest, king, finding that common thread of sincerity, of the great fact of existence.
It's a set of sources that really challenges us, doesn't it, to look beyond the surfaces in our own lives, in the world now?
Definitely. To question the clothes, the formulas, the semblances we just accept every day, whether that's actual clothes or social norms, political slogans, media narratives, even our own internal doubts and assumptions.
And to recognize how vital, genuine conviction and meaningful action rooted in some sense of reality actually are, whether that's on a huge historical stage or just, in our own individual lives and work.
It really is a powerful call to shift from just watching or criticizing to actually doing, from being passive skeptics to active participants. And the sources really hammer that home with that line, the end of man is in action and not a thought.
Right. Thinking is crucial. Understanding is crucial. But ultimately, it has to lead to action to have real meaning.
So considering that final idea from the sources, here's something to think about after this deep dive. Where do you find the true action in your own engagement with the world? What are the formulas, the comfortable assumptions, the appearances, the easy answers, the can't that maybe you need to look through to see more clearly in order to get to that real meaningful action?